Hola, bienvenidos a Discapacidad Televisión. Recuerda suscribirte para no perderte los últimos estrenos y programas en vivo. Danos un me gusta, y así nos ayudarás a conocerte mejor y saber qué programación es tu favorita. Por favor, no te olvides de compartir, así, más personas podrán disfrutar de Discapacidad Televisión y toda su programación. Muchas gracias.
Hola, soy el doctor Carlos Ferreira, abogado y locutor. Junto con Alexi Cañuzca y Coti Garrone hacemos Sin Barreras, un programa que intenta ser un granito de arena para aportar a la inclusión y la accesibilidad. Desde el Centro de Discapacitados de La Matanza, CEDIMA, en San Justo, Partido de La Matanza, República Argentina, llevamos toda la información, análisis y opinión de la problemática de las personas con discapacidad. Los esperamos.
Hola, bienvenidos a Cambiando el Mundo de Personas con Discapacidad. Mi nombre es Raquel Quesada y seré la presentadora del mismo. En el programa hablaremos de la no discriminación, la participación e inclusión plenas y efectiva en la sociedad, a la igualdad de oportunidades de los derechos y a la accesibilidad de las personas con discapacidad, el respeto a la evolución de las facultades de los niños y las niñas con discapacidad y sus derechos a preservar su dignidad, la inclusión, la sensibilidad, la educación, la diversidad. En este programa todos los sábados celebraremos la vida de las personas con discapacidad. Que juntos podemos cambiar el mundo de personas con discapacidad.
Conectados al cuidar, porque nos mueve incluir. Te invitamos a conocer la línea 800-000-058. Conectados al cuidar. Una línea gratuita de apoyo con profesionales dispuestos a acompañar y acoger a personas con discapacidad y sus cuidadoras. Esta línea también está disponible para atender consultas sobre el Servicio Nacional de la Discapacidad y además orientar sobre los trámites y beneficios del Estado en materia de inclusión. Puedes comunicarte de lunes a viernes desde las 9 hasta las 18 horas. Las personas sordas pueden contactarse a través del sistema Visor Web, disponible en el sitio web de Cenadis, www.cenadis.gov.cl.
Prejuicios. Muchos asumen que las personas con discapacidad no podemos sentir atracción por alguien, porque somos como angelitos, como niños, somos inocentes. Hay que transformar esos prejuicios sobre la discapacidad. Las personas con discapacidad podemos sentir atracción y podemos ser atractivos para alguien. Podemos enamorarnos, formar una familia. Tenemos el derecho de decidir sobre nuestra sexualidad con responsabilidad e independencia, y nadie debe quitarnos este derecho. Tampoco nadie puede forzarnos a mantener una relación con otra persona sin nuestro consentimiento. Eso es violencia.
Discapacidad Televisión. Primer canal de televisión dedicado al colectivo de personas con discapacidad desde 2006. A continuación, Footless Yo, más allá de una amputación. Presenta BECKWITH. Audio en inglés, subtítulos en castellano.
there. My beautiful, lovely internet friends, welcome back to my channel. Real quick, if your name is my father, please don't watch this video. For anyone else, let's dive in. My dad is super sweet in that he watches all of the videos that I make, and he always has. He's been a huge supporter, and I love that, but this one topic, you'll understand. So I woke up to a comment this morning saying this: how does the obvious affect my love life? Today I wanted to talk about and disability, and I do have to censor that word because YouTube doesn't like you just coming out and saying it. So I am a 32-year-old woman. I was married for 7 years. I've been in more than one long-term committed relationship and short-term not committed relationships, and I still feel very odd talking publicly about sex because of the background that I came from. But I've actually gotten a lot of feedback over the years, especially from people in person who have recently gone through limb loss and are really concerned about how it's going to affect their love life, their sex life, and I just get a lot of comments, like not the creepy kind, the genuinely interested kind, because the vast majority of humans are actual creatures, we're actual beings, so to wonder only makes sense. And no, you little creeps out there, I'm not going to be going into any gory details, okay? So go ahead and head off if that's what you were here for. What did you think, I was going to get graphic with puppy children present? No, we stay classy here. Also, quick side note, this is not a sponsored message, except kind of because I am advertising myself. I recently started a podcast all about dating, romance, relationships, modern issues, how we are approaching interactions between genders, and more. It's something I'm super excited about. It's called the Turbo Dude Podcast. We are streaming live on my channel. Check the link in the description. New episode is going live tonight, but you can always watch the replay. And also, I figured out how to get us on Spotify. Big brain stuff. So if you're interested in the topic of today's video and want to hear us talk about all of this and more not related to disability, check it out. Let me know what you think. So I want to start off by acknowledging a couple things. I realize that I fall into what I've always said is like the socially, I don't think I'm like a bombshell, right? But I think I fit enough of society's like expectations of what women are supposed to look like. I say that with all of the sarcasm because I think that's bullshit, but I also do recognize that I have a smaller frame, a more athletic build, I'm white, I have blonde hair. Some people say it's brown. I think it's blonde. My driver's license says it's blonde. So that is gonna have an impact on how I have experienced all of this. Additionally, I was not visibly disabled for the first 28 years of my life. I think that I thought, and a lot of society thinks, that there must be some major impact on your sex life if you are disabled in some way. And on the one hand, absolutely, because you have different physical limitations or mental ones. Maybe your body moves a little bit differently than an average person. However, I have found that the same basic tenets, the fact that if you are engaging in like sexual activity, the same ingredients are still necessary, right? When I first lost my leg, I was in a committed relationship. I was married. What I will say about that is that the insecurities that I had about the physical change in my body had way more of an effect than my partner's perception of like my leg being gone and me looking different in that context. This is something that we did, you know, talk through. And for me personally, after the first couple of times we were together in that way, after losing my leg, the vast majority of any insecurity or weirdness I felt around that dissipated. But getting divorced and then re-entering the dating scene, yeah, those insecurities reared their little heads again. I didn't know how I would be perceived by other people. And I've talked about this in other videos that this specific kind of disability, missing a leg, I am very clear about the fact that it is gone if I am, you know, like on a dating app or profile, or if you meet me in real life. It's not going to come as a surprise or a secret. And in my experience, everybody that I have gone out with has been genuinely super cool about it. In some ways, I don't feel like it's all that much different than finding a partner, no matter who you are, and engaging in sex with them. Across the board, there should be communication, you know, clear boundaries, enthusiastically being into it, you know, all parties involved, discussion of what you like and what you don't like. That is the same for disabled bodies as it is for able bodies. Hi there, friends, it's Editing Joe. I realized editing this video that I focused largely on the point that I think that a lot of society thinks that disability has more of an effect on sexuality and sexual relationships than it actually does. However, what I definitely failed to mention, because disability is such a wide spectrum, everyone's experience is different, is a couple things. Number one, finding a partner, whether that's a committed relationship or a casual thing, is definitely more difficult, can be more difficult for people. Specifically, if you have a physical disability, there are a lot of people who will not think of you as sexual, who will automatically write you off for that. It's one of the reasons why I am like really clear when I'm dating that like, hey, my leg is missing before we even meet, because if that's like a deal breaker for someone, I'm not interested in wasting my time or wasting theirs, right? For me, sex is hugely about connection. Like the way that you can get to know someone at that level, I have discovered in the last year and a half is something that's really important to me. I didn't really think of myself as that like physical or sexual of a person for the vast majority of my life for so many reasons, but getting to, you know, just personally explore what that means to me and what I care about, feeling safe in those situations and having the ability to just like explore with someone or, you know, someone's. Me personally, I like the one-on-one thing, but whatever you are into, as long as everybody's into it, go for it. Me missing a leg doesn't change the fact that like, let's communicate, let's set boundaries, let's talk about what we like and what we don't like. And beyond the amputation, like the chronic pain, fibromyalgia, migraine stuff that I deal with, again, it's kind of the same as like anybody else. Some days you're feeling it, some days you're not feeling so great, some days you are up to and, you know, want to engage sexually with your partner, and other times the situation isn't right or you're not feeling it. Also, this is me perhaps thinking overly positively, but I think in some ways having a physical disability when it comes to sexual intimacy is like a gift and a curse kind of thing, right? Because there are going to be things that are different, there are going to be changes that might need to be made, but it does allow for a lot more communication and also for getting creative, right? Because there's troubleshooting, which is a bonding experience for people. You might have to get creative, and I don't see those things as necessarily bad in this context, as long as you are with someone who you trust and feel safe with, which you deserve to always be the case. I think one of the biggest things that I have really worked on developing is not so much like being super confident in how my body looks and loving every, you know, I don't really relate to that. It's more like accepting the fact that, hey, I have a body. That's cool. Grateful to be alive most days. At least that's what I'm supposed to say. Some days are rough, okay? But I am grateful to be alive. And like knowing that I am gonna accept the person that I am engaging in an intimate situation with for exactly who they are and like the body that they have, and like loving and respecting them for that, and expecting the same in return, and just like showing up as who I am. Like, I'm missing a leg. One of the weirdest things to me is that like my abdomen is like floppy, right? Like there's a lot of extra skin because over the years a lot of that muscle has broken down. So it's floppy. It's weird, okay? I don't love the way it looks, but also I'm not gonna allow that to get in the way of me being able to connect with someone on such like a deep, personal, intimate level. If I'm feeling weird about it, let me bring that up with my partner. Let's talk about it. With that being said, fetishes are a very real thing. We all know this. We all love this. And maybe we all have them. I don't know. But fetishes around disability in particular can be really concerning. It is something that I have had to watch out for in the world of dating and really pay attention to like any gut feelings or anything like that, because you will be objectified. Like there are people who are attracted to me specifically because my leg is missing for sexual reasons, and like that doesn't do it for me. I'm not interested in being objectified for that. And there's definitely a community of people that have fetishes for different sorts of disabilities, so you have to be careful. Also, let's talk about safety, vulnerability, and risks. The safety risks for people with disabilities are a lot higher. The statistics are very depressing when it comes to like abuse, assault, things like that. So the emphasis on safety, that you like, that mindset that you have to have really goes up. That is something I try to be very cautious about, like always extra importantly listening to my gut if something doesn't feel right, if a message feels off, if I just don't get a good vibe from a person, because people do see you as more vulnerable. Sexual crimes are perpetrated against people with disabilities at a much higher rate. So like safety first, always, for everybody, but especially if you are a person with a disability dating. In my personal opinion, please feel free to disagree in the comments. Sex with a disability is exactly like sex without a disability. It's figuring out how to connect, have that experience with another person in a way that's like awesome and fantastic and beautiful for the both of you, because every person is so unique and individual. Like how one person receives love or receives pleasure is not going to be the same for any other person. And that's always going to be deeply individual and deeply personal, no matter how many people you've slept with or not. It's still about the person, you know, that you're with in that moment and really getting to know them. And so partner, to really get to know me, this is going to be a part of the package, you know, understanding that certain parts don't feel good, like if they are touched or grabbed or like, you know, moved a certain way, communicating that, understanding that like I get phantom pain quite often throughout the day. I'm gonna like, you know, like yelp or jump a little bit, like that's gonna be a part of my experience. And also that, you know, pain is so bad sometimes that I'm not gonna be up for anything other than laying completely still on the couch. Of all of the things that have impacted my sex life, I would say that this is like top 10. But honestly, being raised in the evangelical Christian church in purity culture, I'll put a link down below if you don't know what that is, but being extremely indoctrinated with shame around the topic of sex, that has impacted how I view myself sexually and how I've been able to engage with people to such a deep and dark extent. Like that has messed me up, and it's something that I feel like I'm just now kind of coming out of and being like, it's okay to enjoy pleasure, like it's okay to want sex, it's okay that I have sexuality, that I'm a sexual being. I don't have to like apologize for that or hide that. Like that previous mindset that I grew up with, that impacted sex for me so heavily. I love the fact that sexuality is a part of who I am, and I have never been able to say that literally any other point in my life because I have been so deeply ashamed to be a sexual creature, to be a sexual being, because I was raised in purity culture in the evangelical Christian church where that shit was shamed so hard. And after spending years working through that to like really love and appreciate my sexuality is such a cool experience. I think generally as a society we tend to think that things that we can see are the things that must have most impact on a person. In my personal experience, that's never been the case. Other types of experiences and traumas that I have gone through in my life have impacted who I am as a person and my experience in the world so much more than losing my leg. And that is the case for how I experience and see sex as well. Also, I want to talk for a moment about if you are someone whose partner has a disability and you guys have a sexual relationship or you want a sexual relationship, how to talk about it or bring it up. I cannot encourage you enough to just open up that conversation. Not talking about things, like not asking questions, is just never gonna be good. Like that's gonna lead to misunderstanding and hurt. If you have questions about how that disability affects how that person sees themselves sexually, they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, all of that, when you guys are, you know, at a level to have that conversation appropriately, ask your partner if you can have that conversation, if you can ask those things, if you can hear about, you know, their experience and their perception and what they're looking for and just all of that. Talk about it. I do not speak for everybody with a disability even a little bit, but I will say that I have so appreciated the moments when, in general, but talking in this video in a sexual context, someone has been like, hey, I was wondering how, you know, blank affects you, or how blank feels, or what you'd be most comfortable about this or that. Having someone just like hear me, right, about an experience that I am the expert on, builds that trust, builds that connection, makes me more comfortable with them. So if you're ever even kind of in doubt, have the conversation, ask the questions. And rule of thumb all the time, respect what the other person has to say. So long story short, sex and disability, it's about communication. It's about getting comfortable with your partner. And disabled or able-bodied, everyone has stuff that is specific to them, that if they're allowing you to engage in that intimate setting with them, you learn, you listen, you understand, you respect. Same for disability. I didn't even run them this morning, but they are tuckered babies. Thank you so much for listening to me chatter here for a bit about sex and disability and my own experience. If you have any specific questions, leave them in the comment section down below. I would love to answer them maybe in a short form video for you. Also, if you want to do me a favor, if you want to check out that link down below to my podcast channel, all of the information is right down there below in the description. If you even kind of enjoyed this video, I'm pretty sure you'd be interested in what we're talking about over there. This is a story that I've honestly been very anxious to share with you guys for quite some time, but due to legal advice have not been able to for about 2.5 years. The reason I am going to tell you the story of me choosing to sue a company that caused my second leg amputation, that caused me not to be able to walk for about 8 months, to be on crutches, having another additional surgery in there because of the injury that was caused by them, is to let you know what it actually is like and what the journey can be like for someone in this kind of a case. I know that there are people out there who have been injured by businesses or by negligence, have considered suing, maybe you've always wondered what the process was like, and so I'm going to detail that out for you here here. I have put timestamps down below if you want to skip to different parts of the video, as this is a bit of a longer story. This whole process, start to finish, was a little bit more than I bargained for, more than I expected, and so I wanted to share what the reality of being involved in a lawsuit can look like, both mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, all of that. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. I've talked about this very lightly in passing. I said, I had a fall, which, led to more surgeries in the second amputation. But the part that I've never really gone into depth about is what actually happened that day, the day that I fell on my freshly amputated leg, which is just a gross sentence to say. So it's kind of a quick recap, especially if you're new to my channel. Hello there, my name is Jo. I had a below the knee leg amputation in October of 2018, and 2 days before I was supposed to get fit for my very first prosthetic leg, I went to get lunch with my husband, Brian. I was on crutches at the time. This is nothing new. I've been on crutches for years of my life because I had so many ankle surgeries. I often joke that I'm a pro on crutches, but I mean, not to hype myself up. I know what I'm doing. I know how to stay upright. We went to this restaurant as we were going to our seats after ordering to sit down. I tried to, take a step with my crutches, but as soon as my crutches touched the ground, they went flying out from underneath me. And unfortunately, I fell directly on my freshly amputated leg. I was 6 weeks out from my amputation surgery. Skin and incisions, and more importantly, bones and soft tissue were still healing. And pretty much my full weight came down on my stump as my crutches flew out from under me. I was on the ground sobbing in like a public restaurant, which was super embarrassing because of the pain that I was in, and also because of the understanding that something felt wrong and what just happened could severely impact my life. I was really scared. I was able to get up off the floor. Even trying to move past that location, because I was still on crutches, was incredibly difficult because the floor was so incredibly greasy, disgustingly so, and slippery. My husband helped me out to the car. He went back in to get our food, but also to take some pictures of the ground, because when you're in a restaurant that deals with really greasy food, there are regulations on degreaser that has to be used on the floors at certain times to make sure it stays safe for people, especially disabled people, but people in general. And it was very clear that the floor was disgusting. Brian said when he was walking over that same kind of area, he had a hard time staying up as well, just because, your feet were sliding around, which they shouldn't be in any restaurant. It's important to note that there were no signs up, noting, hey, the floor might be slippery here. We recently cleaned, because they had. Allegedly, in my opinion, they had not probably done that in a very long time. And I got home, I called my surgeons. They said, rest it, ice it, come see us as soon as you can. And later that evening, I ended up posting on Facebook, now I really understand why caution signs and warning signs and keeping, your business clean is so important, because I just had this really horrible fall that could have compromised my surgery. And, if you own a business, just please be careful. You could hurt people. Then a very good friend of mine who happened to work in the insurance industry gave me a call, asked about what happened, and said, you really need to call them, ask them to preserve the video footage for that whole day. What happened here was wrong. That was not a safe environment for people to be in. So we did that, and as I looked into things with my friends, I realized, oh, okay, places are supposed to be safe for you. They are supposed to be safe, especially for people with disabilities. There were medical bills related to what had happened that day, and so we filed an insurance claim against this company. A very important point to note here is that when I filed that, they preserved the video footage, they reviewed it, they accepted liability for the fall, which is kind of abnormal for a company to do. Like, they weren't fighting it. They were like, yep, you absolutely have, a claim here. And as soon as my injury resolved, I would, send in the medical bills, complete the insurance claim, and move on with my life. I had no intention of doing anything other than just that and moving on with my life. But as many of you know, my leg did not get better. I did get fit for a prosthetic that week. It was very painful. I thought this is just part of the process, right? So I got to take my prosthetic leg home, tried practicing on it. It was not uncomfortable, but like sharp pain. Kept going back for adjustments, being like, this just doesn't feel right. Then we noticed that there was sort of this mass that started forming on the end of my leg where I had fallen. It ended up being something called a bursa and was so painful that I could not use my prosthetic leg by about Christmas. A bursa, which is kind of like a big internal callus, had ended up forming on the bottom of my leg because of the trauma of the fall. Long story short, there was no way that I could wear a prosthetic, and I was on crutches again until the end of March when they could get me in for surgery. They went in, they found a little bit more than that, they fixed it. Here comes April, I start working with my prosthetist Zach to build a new leg. Something still really doesn't feel feel right. I question maybe I'm just a big baby, but I go back to my doctor and explain something still doesn't feel right. And after going back and forth on that for a little while, they eventually did a CT where they discovered that the bones had never fused after my amputation. Now, normally there wouldn't really be any reason for this. My surgery went perfectly, but I had this fall as the bones were attempting to fuse, and that fall made it so that the bones just never properly fused. That was the reason that I had to have the second amputation, where they went in, they completely redid the previous amputation that I had. They took, I think, about an inch off my leg again. I restarted the whole process. And this time it worked because they fixed the underlying problem. By November, I got my new prosthetic leg, I started learning how to walk, and kind of the rest is history. And right around then, when I knew that pretty much everything medically was resolved from the fall, we sent everything in to the insurance company from the restaurant, at which point they then decided, yeah, actually, we're gonna reverse that whole it's our liability thing. Because, at least in my mind, I assumed they didn't realize that it was actually gonna be kind of expensive. So they basically told me it was our fault, but now it's no longer our fault. And I worked with my friend who knows the system to try to get something done without involving lawyers, who I am not a fan of. But long story short, by January we had to bring in professional help and began a formal lawsuit against this company. I really want to stress the fact that I never, ever would have gone forward with any of this if it weren't for the fact that my doctor clearly stated the reason that this did not heal is because of the fall. Like those months where I was on crutches, those months where I should have been learning to walk and getting active again, finally after so many years of struggle, the reason that I was not able to do that is because this restaurant did not clean their floors and additionally did not have any signs up. So we ended up meeting with a couple lawyers. I'm just gonna put an asterisk on my relationship with lawyers. We'll circle back to that. And formally filed a lawsuit. Hello again, quick point of clarification. When I say I'm suing this company, technically I am suing that company, but it is their insurance company who is going to pay for it. This is not money coming out of a business owner's pockets. Additionally, this is a major, large, nationwide franchise. The location in particular did close prior to us settling this, but that honestly didn't have an impact because we're dealing directly with their insurance company. This is why businesses pay for insurance, is for these kinds of situations. So I just want to clarify, I wasn't like going after small business owners. It is their insurance who ends up fitting the bill for any kind of settlement, anything along those lines. These things aren't a fast process. So then there was months of evidence gathering on both sides, and then came the depositions. This is where things started getting really weird for me. If you are involved in a lawsuit, you might be deposed, where basically the other side can ask you questions. You can have your lawyer there to object if they're outside the scope of what they're allowed to ask, but what they're allowed to ask of you, in my mind, is obscene. Just kind of a harmless example, I had to give them every place I went to school and every place I lived back to kindergarten. I walked into a restaurant that was unsafe and fell, and they have a right to all of my personal information dating back to age 5. Absolutely nuts. And that was information I had to provide even prior to the actual deposition, but I get there day of. And my only experience with the legal system prior to this is when I attempted to file charges against the man who had assaulted and abused me. That was an incredibly traumatic experience within our legal system. My only experience with lawyers and depositions prior to this year has been over things that were incredibly sensitive, being handled very insensitively and in a very re-traumatizing way. So even getting to the deposition was really freaking hard for me, but I knew I could do it. I sat there, I went through with it, and it was hours of personal questions. I'd say maybe 20 to 30% was like what actually happened the day of the fall. They presented me with 63, I believe, 63 pages of social media posts after the fall, after the surgery, like over the past year and a half, where they're like, well, you're here clearly hiking, so you're fine, right? You're fine. What's this one mean? What's this one mean? I'm like, well, that's me hiking. That's me with my dogs. That's me whatever. And it became clear that their strategy was to basically prove that because I had chosen to live life, and because after that last surgery that worked, I got my prosthetic leg working and started doing things like running and going to a ninja gym, because my life was fine now, It seemed like their strategy was to prove that it wasn't really that bad what happened. Now everything is working back from a trial date that's already been set. That was set for October. But mediation is something that's required in my state, where basically you sit down with a professional. In our case, it was a retired judge who is there to mediate the two different sides, and the idea is to hopefully come to a settlement, come to an agreement, to not have to go to court. I consider myself to be a pretty diplomatic person. I know generally when I need to hold my tongue, how I need to keep my tone, especially in professional environments, and I can say that being in this mediation was one of the only times where I was genuinely concerned I might lose my cool and say something disrespectful to people in authority, like an ex-judge. The mediation went terribly. They were instructing me about how prosthetics worked, like the basics of prosthetics, and using it against me, like, well, sometimes it's just hard to get a prosthetic fit. What you don't understand is that oftentimes amputees have to go back more than once. And it felt so insulting, because that is literally my life. That is literally my lived experience. And also, I talk about this stuff all day, every day. I'm not an expert on prosthetics, but I am an expert on my experience with prosthetics. And to have a judge trying to tell me that, well, sometimes amputees struggle to get a good fit, offering like some kind of excuse that, you know, maybe the fall wasn't really that bad, when I have a doctor who literally put in writing for this whole lawsuit that the fall that I had in their restaurant caused the second leg amputation that I had. Another thing that they brought up as like actual evidence against me was the fact that they went in and did a analysis of the floor and said that it was safe. And when asked when this analysis was done, it was done this year. So they checked the floor out after the business had closed, by the way, 3 years after the fact, and said, no, it seems safe. You should have been fine walking on it. Sucks that you fell, but clearly this was a safe environment. 3 years later, they analyzed the floor. 3 years later, after the conditions were totally different, after that restaurant had moved out of that building. I'm gonna stop. It's just crazy to me that that was actual evidence that would be considered, that was taken seriously. And then there was a lot of finger pointing to like, you're living a great life now, so why does it really matter? Those were not the words used, but they continued to bring up different activities that I now participate in, as if that was an accusation against me. It became very clear to me that it would have been much better for me if I had just decided to stop actively living life and sat in a sad hole and never did anything. They kept bringing up all these things as if the 8 months of not being able to walk, being in pain, not being able to wear a prosthetic, having to have more of my body hacked off of me was not really that big of an issue. And we did not even get close to the idea of a settlement we could all agree on that day. Now at this point, which was like a month and a half ago, I was mentally and emotionally at the end of my rope. This is not something I wanted to deal with anymore. This is not something I wanted to talk about anymore. I didn't want to have to keep reliving that fall. In and of itself, it wasn't emotionally traumatic to me, but it definitely did leave a huge impact. The reason that I chose to have a leg amputation was so that I could get active again, hopefully, and stop having surgeries. Instead, I was significantly less active, where for the majority of the time, the problems were actually unknown. I was in a lot of physical pain that took a toll on my mental health, and I didn't know if I was gonna be able to walk again. And I had to have more surgeries, which is the thing I was trying to get away from. This had a significant impact on my life. And I feel like the way that lawsuits go and the way that our legal system is set up, it really brushes over that issue. Like, you suddenly become a subject for questioning and being picked apart on things that are painful. I understand that that's how it goes. There were more details that were very insulting that I won't include here that they brought up and offered, but because we did not come to a settlement number that day, I really had two options, three, I guess. I could drop the whole thing and walk away. We could try to come to a settlement, even though we were very far apart in our ideas of what might be fair. Or we could go to trial. Going to trial is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's a trial. There is a jury involved. You have witnesses. I would have to give my account in front of people. We'd have to bring people in. We'd have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to pay my doctor to show up, to have him testify. But then they're gonna hire another doctor who reviews my medical records and says, nah, I actually don't think that's the reason why. So they kind of cancel each other out. And at the end of the day, what I was told is a large portion of it comes down to luck, and a large portion of it comes down to whether or not the jury likes you. And I'll be totally honest, I know that I'm a pretty likable person. I am super grateful that I like people. And as a very general thing, people usually like me too. And I knew, and I was told, that if I did go to trial, I would have a decent chance of winning. And the figures that are involved in winning a case like this are substantial. But there also is substantial risk in that if the jury did not side with me, I would owe all of their legal fees, and we are talking tens, plural, of thousands of dollars, which I do not have, which would financially ruin my family for the foreseeable future. And Brian, who is an incredible support, was completely gung-ho, like, yes, let's do this. I know you have a case, like, this is a real thing. I'm willing to take that risk. Let's do it. Let's go get them. But there were some pretty big factors going on in my head. Number one, while I am fully aware of the fact that I am capable of handling it, having to deal with our legal system, having to deal with being basically interrogated in front of other people for something that has hurt me, because I have such a negative and traumatic history with that, it takes a toll. It takes a real toll on me to even think about, and all the preparation that would go into that. The risk of potentially losing more from a situation, a fall that already cost me so much in my life, in my time, in my emotional energy, and also financially. The idea that I could lose even more was actually horrifying to think about, and most importantly of all, there have been a number of difficult things that I've gone through in my life that I've had no say in. Bad things happen, and you've got to adjust, you've got to deal, and you're forced to figure out a way to get through it. So rarely has there been anything in my life that happened that was significant and uncomfortable or bad that I could opt out of. Hey there, I wanted to pop back in to mention something that I kind of brushed over. Along with kind of the mental health implications of like stress leading up to the trial, one of the biggest decision factors for me is chronic migraine and fibromyalgia. When there is external or internal stress, that is a big trigger for physical pain, for feeling very unwell, for having more migraine days where I'm unable to work and I'm very uncomfortable and in a lot of pain. And if I had decided to move forward to trial, I knew that I was signing up for a lot of physical pain as well, just because of how my body works, right? And also because courts have been so backed up because of COVID. We had an October date set for trial, but that was probably going to be continued. So I'd be signing up for months of stress leading up to this, for months of having to think about this and prepare, and months of additional stress on my body that was going to cause physical repercussions along with mental health ones. And that was a really big factor for me because I've been trying to work on making my life as healthy of an environment for the body that I live in as I can, being able to manage stress well, and adding so much more to it when I'm trying to get pain more under control just didn't seem like a good idea. And the thought of going through with this process, the thought of prolonging this stress, which has been hanging over me for years, the thought of dealing with more lawyers and more conflict, and my character and reputation being put on the stand because I walked in somewhere and it was unsafe. The fact that I could now be picked apart and was being picked apart for that. There was a huge piece of me that was like, you know what? I think I want to opt out of this. I really do. I've never had the chance to be like, no, I'm done with something really that was significant and painful to me, and it was a really hard decision to make. I had a lot of voices involved, many of whom were encouraging that it might be a good idea to move forward with this, you know, even if it's uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, with it being my choice, I had and have a good deal going on with my health. There's enough going on in my life over the past few years that I kind of wanted a break from all of it. And so instead of going to trial, I made the decision to work for a settlement outside of court after mediation. We came to an agreement on a number that didn't come close to covering a whole lot, but at least it was something, right? So I was able to do things like pay off some medical bills, which is fantastic, and some other things. I'm just gonna speak personally here for a second. I understand why our systems work the way that they do. But when you are injured by someone else's negligence, actions, or lack of actions, and it impacts your life in a severely negative way, and you are seeking for that to be made right, the things that you have to go through, the parts of your life, your personal life, that you have to justify and defend. It's obscene to me. The things that they were allowed to ask me and know about my life, down to medications I am currently taking. They have no right to know that. At one point, they wanted to access my therapist's records, and that is not a door that I am willing to open for people. Like, I get why it works the way that it does, but I honestly can't imagine a scenario in which I would ever optionally go through that again. At the end of the day, I am glad that I went through with this. The emotional toll that it took was significantly more than I would have expected. A large part of that was due to pre-existing trauma conditions in my brain that made this all a very trigger-filled kind of situation for me. It did give me an opportunity to work through a lot of my triggers with PTSD when it comes to lawyers and depositions and things of that nature, which I think was a good thing, though it was not a comfortable thing. And again, at the end of the day, I am grateful that the settlement we arranged did allow for the alleviation of medical bills and things along those lines. So that is a good thing. It was a heck of a process to go through and was a lot more than I ever could have expected. And I probably should have looked a little bit further into what a lawsuit really entails. It's not a short process. It's not an easy process. It requires a lot from you. It can get pretty darn expensive. Talking about the lawyer aspect of things, they only get paid if you get paid unless you go to trial. However, with that being said, there are a lot of expenses involved in the process, from getting medical bills and medical records, which is insanely expensive, little did I know, and bringing in expert witnesses and all this different stuff. So there is a lot involved to it, but all in all, it's over now. I'm glad I never have to deal with this again, and I think I am glad that I went through with it. But it was very stressful and is probably not something I would optionally choose to ever be a part of again. If you have any questions about this process, please leave comments down below. I might do a follow-up video on this with some other kind of tidbits and interesting information, especially from kind of the deposition, the mediation, the things that they said about me and asked me. But that is what has been going on for almost 3 years now that I haven't been able, to speak about, because you're not supposed to speak about ongoing litigation. That's the word. But it's done now, so yay. Also, I would ask that no one speculate in the comment section about what restaurant this was. I could name them. I am not under an NDA to not disclose anything, but I just don't think that there is a reason to. This is one location out of many. Just that particular location is no longer in business, so I don't think that there's a reason to talk about the restaurant as a whole, so I would ask you not to speculate down below. So I mentioned earlier in the video that it was a friend of mine who works in insurance that helped me kind of get this process started and walked with me through a lot of it. You know who you are. I just want to say again, thank you so much for all of your help. There's no way that I could have done literally any of this without you. I wouldn't have been able to make the call in the first place, and so much of the follow-up and the support that you gave me was just incredible. So thank you so much, my dear friend. So with that being said, happy fall. This is my yay, it's actually getting cold outside colored shirt. I'm excited for long drives in the mountains with warm beverages with my husband in the near future, and the changing of the leaves. But on that note, thank you for watching this. Thank you for spending a few minutes out of your day here with me today. You could be anywhere else in the world doing absolutely anything else, but you chose to hang out with me for a few minutes, and I really appreciate that. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.
Discapacidad Televisión.
¡Hola, mundo!
Primer canal de televisión dedicado al colectivo de personas con discapacidad desde 2006. Hola, bienvenidos a Discapacidad Televisión. Recuerda suscribirte para no perderte los últimos estrenos y programas en vivo. Danos un me gusta, y así nos ayudarás a conocerte mejor y saber qué programación es tu favorita. Por favor, no te olvides de compartir, así, más personas podrán disfrutar de Discapacidad Televisión y toda su programación. Muchas gracias.
Hola, soy el doctor Carlos Ferreira, abogado y locutor. Junto con Alexi Cañuzca y Coti Garrone hacemos Sin Barreras, un programa que intenta ser un granito de arena para aportar a la inclusión y la accesibilidad. Desde el Centro de Discapacitados de La Matanza, CEDIMA, en San Justo, partido de La Matanza, República Argentina, llevamos toda la información, análisis y opinión de la problemática de las personas con discapacidad. Los esperamos.
Hola, bienvenidos a Cambiando el Mundo de Personas con Discapacidad.
Cambiaremos el mundo teniendo igualdad.
Mi nombre es Raquel Quesada y seré la presentadora del mismo. En el programa hablaremos de la no discriminación, la participación e inclusión plenas y efectiva en la sociedad, a la igualdad de oportunidades de los derechos y a la accesibilidad de las personas con discapacidad, el respeto a la evolución de las facultades de los niños y las niñas con discapacidad y sus derechos a preservar su dignidad, la inclusión, la sensibilidad, la educación, la diversidad. En este programa todos los sábados celebraremos la vida de las personas con discapacidad. Que juntos podemos cambiar el mundo de personas con discapacidad.
Yo soy Juan José Novoa, estamos en las oficinas del Registro Civil en Quito. Yo estoy en situación de discapacidad por un accidente de tránsito hace 4 años.
El Registro Civil brinda atención prioritaria a personas con discapacidad.
Me fue súper bien, un trámite gratuito, muy ágil, fui acompañado por los distintos pasos del trámite y que estoy muy contento de haberlo realizado.
Es fácil, seguro y ágil. Nuestra identidad ahora es digital.
Conectados al cuidar, porque nos mueve incluir. Te invitamos a conocer la línea 800-000-058. Conectados al cuidar. Una línea gratuita de apoyo con profesionales dispuestos a acompañar y acoger a personas con discapacidad y sus cuidadoras. Esta línea también está disponible para atender consultas sobre el Servicio Nacional de la Discapacidad y además orientar sobre los trámites y beneficios del Estado en materia de inclusión. Puedes comunicarte de lunes a viernes desde las 9 hasta las 18 horas. Las personas sordas pueden contactarse a través del sistema Visor Web, disponible en el sitio web de Cenadis, www.cenadis.gov.cl.
En la vereda se acerca una mujer ciega con su bebé en brazos.
Mira que es un garage, pasa por allá.
Un auto cruzado en la vereda es una barrera.
Un joven en silla de ruedas y el entrenador.
Bueno, este es nuestro querido club.
Me gustó el club.
Está muy bueno. Lo único, vas a tener que venir cambiado a tu casa, porque los vestuarios son subiendo esa escalera.
Que solo haya escaleras es una barrera.
Hola, Anita. ¿Me das un cuarto de pan? Anita, ¿vos vas al cole?
Pauli,
Tengo 42 años. Soy más grande que vos. Infantilizada. Es una barrera.
Una mujer avanza por un supermercado.
Permiso. Permiso. ¿Qué sos, sordo, que no te moves?
Eso es todo.
La mujer se disculpa.
Los prejuicios son barreras.
Avancemos hacia una sociedad sin barreras. Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad. Argentina Presidencia.
Prejuicios. Muchos asumen que las personas con discapacidad no podemos sentir atracción por alguien porque somos como angelitos, como niños, somos inocentes. Hay que transformar esos prejuicios sobre la discapacidad. Las personas con discapacidad podemos sentir atracción y podemos ser atractivos para alguien. Podemos enamorarnos, formar una familia. Tenemos el derecho de decidir sobre nuestra sexualidad con responsabilidad e independencia, y nadie debe quitarnos este derecho. Tampoco nadie puede forzarnos a mantener una relación con otra persona sin nuestro consentimiento. Eso es violencia.
En México, muchas niñas y niños y adolescentes viven con alguna discapacidad. Y tanto ellas y ellos como quienes no tienen ninguna, debemos gozar de los mismos derechos y vivir en igualdad.
Así lo dice la Ley General de los Derechos de Niñas, Niños y Adolescentes, la cual menciona que tanto autoridades como personas cuidadoras
deben derribar las barreras físicas y culturales que impiden el desarrollo de las niñas y niños con discapacidad.
Vivir en un México incluyente y sin barreras es nuestro derecho. Para más información, consulta www.gov.mx/Cipinas.
Gracias al esfuerzo de parlamentarios, se aprobó una moción parlamentaria que hace una cosa súper concreta y que como gobierno tenemos que promulgar, que es que hoy día, si tú te estacionas en un estacionamiento para personas con discapacidad o impides el acceso o utilizas parte del espacio, la sanción aumentó. ¿Cuál va a ser ahora? Vas a tener que pagar entre 50.000 pesos y 75.000 pesos de multa y además el juez puede suspenderte la licencia si es que has cometido otra infracción grave en el año. Por lo tanto, de la situación anterior, que era una multa mucho inferior y que no había suspensión de licencia, tenemos hoy día una sanción más dura que hace que tengamos incentivos correctos para que la gente no ocupe los estacionamientos de las personas con discapacidad. Esperamos que los chilenos tengamos conciencia de esto, pero además ya tenemos sanciones más duras para aquellos que no son capaces de entender este mensaje.
Las y los adolescentes y jóvenes con discapacidad pueden tomar decisiones sobre su sexualidad. Sí, las personas adolescentes y jóvenes con discapacidad intelectual, física, auditiva, visual y psicosocial tienen el derecho de vivir plenamente su sexualidad. El goce de sus derechos sexuales y reproductivos está garantizado en varias leyes nacionales e internacionales. Si ellos lo necesitan, pueden contar con una persona de confianza, que puede ser un familiar o un amigo o amiga, para que les apoye cuando tomen decisiones. Pero absolutamente nadie puede decidir por ellos, independientemente del tipo y el porcentaje de su discapacidad. Para orientarse mejor, deben contar con servicios de salud pública que garanticen información accesible, que incluya, por ejemplo, lengua de señas, señalética en braille, y materiales informativos de fácil lectura.
Durante los últimos años, el país viene avanzando en la superación de las restricciones que tienen las personas con discapacidad para una participación significativa en la sociedad y el total ejercicio de sus derechos. Sin embargo, aún existen limitaciones para el ejercicio de sus derechos en igualdad de condiciones. En la actualidad, con el apoyo de las Naciones Unidas, el Estado culminó con éxito la fase de prueba de un baremo único nacional para personas mayores de 18 años que permite determinar la condición de discapacidad. Este baremo único facilitará la vida de las personas con discapacidad, eliminando la necesidad de repetir la evaluación de su condición cada vez que se acerquen a un organismo prestador diferente. Ahora nos encontramos en la fase de prueba con la población entre 6 meses a 18 años de edad. En esta etapa es necesario que bebés, niños, niñas y adolescentes con alguna discapacidad se sumen como voluntarios para testear el cuestionario. Para rellenar el formulario se debe ingresar en la página web de Naciones Unidas en Uruguay y dirigirse al link que se encuentra en el borde superior de la página. Tu participación es importante.
Conectate para compartir. Imágenes del nuevo punto digital de la Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad. Habla Fernando Galarraga, director ejecutivo de la ANDIS.
Con Agustín Rossi, nuestro jefe de gabinete, hoy inauguramos el punto digital de la Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad. Nos sumamos así a una red de casi 700 puntos digitales en todo el país. Y la verdad que estos puntos son centrales porque son una puerta de ingreso a las nuevas tecnologías, a la sociedad de la información y con perspectiva de discapacidad, es decir, que trabajamos para que todos los puntos, no solo el nuestro, sean accesibles. En todas las computadoras que hay en los puntos digitales hay lectores de pantalla, ya se está formando el personal para que manejen distintos insumos relacionados con la discapacidad y la atención a personas con discapacidad, y creo que la tecnología es una gran herramienta para promover la inclusión. Debemos garantizar que sea accesible para todas las personas con discapacidad. Este nuevo avance, esta nueva propuesta desde la Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad con la Secretaría de Innovación va en ese camino, pensando siempre en el Estado que tiene que garantizar los derechos de las personas con discapacidad.
Primero la gente. Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad.
¿Qué es la educación inclusiva? Es aquella que genera oportunidades de participación y aprendizaje, donde se apuesta por entornos adecuados para que todos los niños y niñas aprendan juntos, independientemente de sus condiciones personales, sociales o culturales. El artículo 16 de la Constitución Política del Perú, el artículo 24 de la Convención sobre los Derechos de la Persona con Discapacidad y el artículo 35 de la Ley número 29973, Ley General de la Persona con Discapacidad, establecen el derecho al acceso a la educación de los niños y niñas con discapacidad en sus 3 niveles, primaria, secundaria y superior inclusiva, con los ajustes razonables según lo requiera. El acceso a la educación es vital para la formación de las personas con discapacidad. Allí se logran forjar habilidades y conocimientos para un posterior desarrollo laboral y profesional, generando así una sociedad más inclusiva.
Gobierno del Perú. El Perú primero.
Un teclado y una impresora braille sobre una mesa. En la ANDIS, distintas personas aguardan sentadas.
Hola, yo soy Alex Correa. Con este dispositivo yo voy a usar para escuchar la lectura de un libro y todo eso. Bueno, yo voy a sexto año y ya en un rato ya voy a terminar y voy a ir a la universidad. Voy a estudiar para ser actor de doblaje.
Me llamo Nayara, tengo 14 años, voy a la escuela San Judas Tadeo y llevo este prócer para que me ayude a leer bien.
Bueno, mi nombre es María José Torres, soy directora de la Escuela Especial 508 de Lanús de Motores. Hemos recibido el kit de impresora y computadoras para niños con discapacidad visual. Es una alegría, así que muchas gracias.
Mi
nombre es Adrián Lagomarcino, yo soy el papá de Gala Lagomarcino, ella es ciega de nacimiento y realmente este dispositivo le da una facilidad de acceso y sobre todo independencia porque no depende de la mamá o de mí para que se lo adapte. Y es un agradecimiento a la nación, ¿no? A todos, porque todos ponen para que esto se logre. Y la segunda satisfacción es que está hecha con manos argentinas, de pibes estudiantes argentinos, cordobeses. Y bueno, simplemente el agradecimiento a todos.
Primero la gente. Agencia Nacional de Discapacidad.
¿Sabías que existen mitos en torno al Registro Nacional de la Discapacidad y a la credencial de discapacidad? Por ejemplo, 1. Tener la credencial de discapacidad vulnera los derechos de las personas con discapacidad y las estigmatiza. Falso. La credencial es un registro para conocer dónde están las personas con discapacidad y mejorar políticas públicas, velando por sus derechos y derribando prejuicios. 2. Con la credencial de discapacidad estás inscrito en el Senadis. Falso. La credencial es un documento entregado por el Registro Civil y no por Senadis. 3. Al sumarse al Registro Nacional de la Discapacidad y obtener la credencial, las personas con discapacidad intelectual o psíquica serán declaradas interdictas. Falso. El proceso de interdicción es establecido por un tribunal de justicia. 4. Al estar en el Registro Nacional de la Discapacidad, las personas con discapacidad podrán obtener la pensión de invalidez. Falso. La pensión de invalidez es un trámite distinto a la credencial de discapacidad. 5. El porcentaje de la credencial de discapacidad condiciona la posibilidad de tener mayores beneficios sociales. Falso. El porcentaje de tu credencial no influye en la entrega de beneficios. Recuerda, la inscripción en el Registro Nacional de la Discapacidad es tu decisión. Mi decisión, mi credencial. Súmate al Registro Nacional de la Discapacidad.
Nací en Cali, Valle. Mi padre tenía un bar cervecero. A eso de los 20 años tuve el accidente en el mismo negocio familiar, que de allí fue que quedé así, pero prácticamente discapacitado. Transcurrió todo el tiempo así. Cuando yo estaba trabajando con un primo, ahí fue cuando hubo un inconveniente, me tocó que salí del país. No dije nada, sino de que me voy. Salí, de una vez me vine ya para Ecuador. Yo no sabía qué era, por lo menos, refugio. Uno podía dialogar sobre eso y para quedarse en un país, que tenía ayuda, ¿no? Al tiempo de no recordar de que me dijeron otras personas que ANUR quedaba por ahí mismo, que porque no iba a tomar refugio. Primero a mí me dieron para arriendo, comida, poder trabajar, que una persona que tanto como por discapacidad como por refugiado tengo ciertos derechos, siempre han estado a mi lado. ¿Para qué? Con mi señora trabajamos en el parque municipal, lustrando zapatos, pintando zapatos, reformándolos. De eso es lo que hoy en día vivo muy tranquilo. Como me fascina tanto el deporte, siempre he estado con el Club Sin Paro aquí en Santo Domingo. Muchas veces sí, he dejado de hacer mi trabajo por irme a jugar. Me gusta más que todo tener amigos, me gusta tener muchas motivaciones. Lo vivo muy agradecido.
Diversidad es México. Personas con discapacidad. En México hay cerca de 6.180.000 personas con discapacidad, lo que representa el 4.9% de la población total, siendo la mayoría mujeres, con el 53%, y hombres el 47% restante. El INEGI identifica a las personas con discapacidad como aquellas que tienen dificultad para llevar a cabo actividades consideradas básicas. Las más comunes son caminar, 48%, ver, 44%, oír, 22%, bañarse, vestirse o comer, 19%, recordar o concentrarse, 19%, y hablar o comunicarse, 15%. Aunado a ello, la discriminación es un aspecto que también sufren las personas con discapacidad, ya que 1 de cada 4 personas la ha padecido. Y según la encuesta nacional sobre discriminación, ENADIS 2017, las principales problemáticas que enfrentan son calles, instalaciones y transportes públicos inadecuados, 31.1%, falta de oportunidad para encontrar empleo, 30%, costo en cuidados, terapias y tratamientos, 21.5%. Este grupo de la población también enfrenta condiciones pronunciadas de exclusión. De acuerdo con resultados del ENADIS 2017, de las personas de 18 años o más encuestadas, el 25.4% de los hombres y 23.8% de las mujeres creen que las personas con discapacidad son de poca ayuda en el trabajo. Por ello, es fundamental la promoción y protección de sus derechos humanos para lograr su plena inclusión en la sociedad y puedan desarrollarse en condiciones de igualdad y dignidad. Todas y todos debemos respetar los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Diversidad es México. Comisión Nacional de los Derechos Humanos. Defendemos al pueblo.
Hola, bienvenidos a Discapacidad Televisión. Recuerda suscribirte para no perderte los últimos estrenos y programas en vivo. Danos un me gusta, y así nos ayudarás a conocerte mejor y saber qué programación es tu favorita. Por favor, no te olvides de compartir, así, más personas podrán disfrutar de Discapacidad Televisión y toda su programación. Muchas gracias. Discapacidad Televisión.
¡Hola, mundo!
Primer canal de televisión dedicado al colectivo de personas con discapacidad desde 2006.